In the vast cosmos where empires span galaxies and species wage wars across star systems, humanity was nothing more than a footnote, a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. We were insects to the great powers, our technology laughable, our warriors weak. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds, their Queen Vexera had never known defeat, and their bioengineered soldiers were considered unstoppable forces of nature. But there's something the galaxy never understood about humans. We don't just fight to win, we fight to survive. And, when survival is on the line, we become something else entirely. Something that even the most advanced alien species have never encountered. This is the story of how a single human soldier's blood changed everything. How one wound would shatter the confidence of the most feared queen in the galaxy and reveal a truth about humanity that would echo across the stars: we are not the weak species they thought we were. We are something far more dangerous. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology, our numbers, or our strategies. It's something written into our very DNA, something that no alien species possesses, something that makes us the most terrifying creatures in the universe when pushed too far. This is how the war began. This is how everything changed. This is the day the Zephyrian Queen looked at human blood and whispered words that would haunt her empire forever: "This cannot be real." The mining station Kepler 442b was supposed to be humanity's quiet foothold in the Outer Rim. Nothing more than a collection of prefabricated modules and extraction equipment, manned by a skeleton crew of 43 souls who had volunteered for the isolation pay. Captain Marcus Chen had been running security for the station for 2 years, and the most exciting thing he'd encountered was a malfunctioning atmospheric recycler. That changed when the Zephyrian dreadnought materialized out of hyperspace like a mountain of living metal. Chen watched from the observation deck as the alien vessel approached, its bioorganic hull pulsing with veins of blue light. The ship was beautiful in the way that predators were beautiful, sleek, purposeful, and utterly deadly. It dwarfed their little mining station like a whale next to a minnow. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," called out Ensign Rodriguez from the communication station, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "It's not in any language our computers recognize, but the universal translator is working on it." "Put it through," Chen ordered, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma rifle at his side. Not that it would do much good against whatever was aboard that monster of a ship. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that made Chen's breath catch in his throat. The creature, no, the alien, stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body a graceful blend of humanoid form and something altogether more predatory. Its skin was a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light, marked with silver patterns that pulsed like circuitry. 6 arms moved with fluid precision, each ending in hands that looked capable of crushing steel. But it was the face that held Chen's attention, elegant features that were almost human, if not for the 4 golden eyes and the crown of bone spikes that marked this being as royalty. "I am Queen Vexera of the Zephyrian Empire," the being spoke, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The translation came through crystal clear, each word precisely enunciated. "You will surrender this facility and submit to imperial rule. Resistance will result in immediate termination." Chen stepped forward, knowing that his next words would likely determine whether his crew lived or died. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation. This system is under human jurisdiction. We're peaceful miners, not soldiers. There's no need for conflict here." The Queen's 4 eyes fixed on him through the screen, and Chen felt like an insect being examined by a scientist. "Human," she said the word as if tasting something unpleasant. "Your species is known to us. Weak, primitive, barely worthy of notice. You have 60 seconds to power down your defenses and prepare for boarding." "We don't have defenses worth mentioning," Chen replied honestly. "But I can't surrender my people without at least trying to negotiate." "What do you want here? Our mining operation isn't worth starting a war over." Something like amusement flickered across the Queen's alien features. "War? Human, your entire species could not threaten a single Zephyrian patrol ship. This is not war. This is collection." The transmission cut out, and immediately the station's alarms began blaring. Chen turned to his small security team, 3 Marines who looked as overwhelmed as he felt. "Rodriguez, get on the emergency beacon. Send everything we have about this contact back to Earth.
Everyone else, grab what weapons we have and prepare for boarding.
Sir, one of the Marines, Corporal Hayes, spoke up.
We've got mining charges, some industrial cutting tools, and our sidearms. Against whatever's on that ship.
I know the odds, Hayes, Chen cut him off.
But we're not going down without a fight. That's what separates us from the animals.
The station shuddered as the alien ship made contact, and Chen could hear the distinctive whine of cutting tools working through the hull. Whatever the Zephyrians were using, it was making short work of their defenses.
He gathered his people in the main corridor, the only choke point that might give them any advantage.
Remember, he told them as the sounds of forced entry grew louder, aim for center mass, stay behind cover, and don't let them separate us.
And if things go bad?
He paused, looking at each face in turn.
Make it count.
The airlock burst open with a sound like thunder, and Chen got his first look at Zephyrian soldiers. They were smaller than their queen but no less intimidating, living weapons wrapped in bioarmor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. They moved with inhuman speed and grace, their weapons crackling with energy that made the air itself hum with menace. Chen opened fire, his plasma rifle sending bolts of superheated gas down the corridor. His Marines joined in, their weapons adding to the light show, but the aliens barely seemed to notice. Their armor absorbed the impacts like rain on stone, and they advanced with the confidence of beings who had never known defeat.
The first soldier reached Chen's position in seconds, moving faster than human eyes could track.
Chen tried to bring his rifle around, but six-fingered hands grabbed the weapon and crushed it like paper. He pulled his sidearm, got off one shot that sparked harmlessly off alien armor, and then found himself lifted off the ground by a grip that felt like a mechanical vice. The soldier examined him with curious, multifaceted eyes, then spoke in its own language. Other soldiers had captured his team with similar ease, though Chen was relieved to see that none of his people appeared to be seriously injured. The aliens seemed more interested in collecting than killing. They were herded through the station like livestock, past mining equipment and living quarters that represented 2 years of hard work and modest dreams. Chen felt anger building in his chest, not just at the invasion, but at how easily they had been overcome.
Humanity had always prided itself on its fighting spirit, but what good was spirit against beings who could catch plasma bolts with their bare hands? The alien ship's interior was unlike anything Chen had ever seen.
The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with that same blue light he had observed from outside. The air was thick with humidity and carried scents that his brain couldn't categorize alien smells from an alien world. Everything was organic, grown rather than built, and it made him feel like he was walking through the digestive tract of some massive creature. They were brought to what was clearly a throne room, though calling it that seemed inadequate. The space was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows above. The walls were covered in what looked like living tapestries that moved and shifted in response to the Queen's presence. And there, on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal, sat Queen Vexera. She was even more imposing in person. Her 6 arms moved in complex patterns as she studied holographic displays that showed the mining station's complete technical specifications. She had already learned everything there was to know about their operation, their technology, their capabilities. To her, they were just another primitive species to be catalogued and dismissed. "Humans," she said without looking up from her displays. "Your technology is crude, your weapons laughable, your tactics non-existent. You offer nothing of value to the Empire save perhaps manual labor. Yet you chose to resist." Now she looked at them, her 4 golden eyes seeming to burn within her fire. "Explain this decision." Chen stepped forward, ignoring the weapons that tracked his movement. "We're not slaves to be collected. We're people with rights, with dignity. We fight because surrender isn't in our nature." The Queen made a sound that might have been laughter. "Nature? How quaint. Do you know what my nature is, human? I have conquered 17 star systems. I have broken the will of species far more advanced than yours. I have ended entire civilizations with a word. Your nature is irrelevant." "Maybe," Chen admitted. "But it's all we have." Something in his tone must have intrigued her, because the Queen descended from her throne with fluid grace. She approached until she loomed over him, her height making him feel like a child. One of her lower arms reached out, fingers trailing along his jaw with surprising gentleness.
You interest me, human. What is your name? Marcus Chen.
Marcus Chen, she repeated, seeming to savor the unfamiliar sounds. You will serve as a specimen. I wish to study this defiance you speak of, to understand what drives a creature to futile resistance. Her upper arms gestured to her soldiers. Place him in the holding cells with the others. We will begin experimentation once we reach Imperial space. As the soldiers moved to comply, Chen made his decision. He couldn't save his people, couldn't fight off an entire alien invasion force, but he could deny them at least one small victory. His hand found the emergency beacon on his belt, not the one for sending messages, but the one that would overload the station's fusion reactor. It would take the mining operation with it, along with any intelligence the aliens hoped to gather. What are you? The Queen began, her enhanced senses picking up the device's activation. This is what human nature looks like, Chen said, and triggered the beacon. The explosion that followed wasn't massive by military standards, just a mining station's reactor going critical. But it happened at close range, and the Zephyrian ship, despite its advanced technology, was caught off guard. The blast wave tore through the docking bay, causing catastrophic decompression that sent debris flying through the throne room like shrapnel. Chen felt something sharp slice across his forearm, a piece of twisted metal that opened a gash from elbow to wrist. He ignored the pain, watching as alien soldiers scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency barriers slammed down, atmosphere recyclers worked overtime, and damage control teams responded with military precision. But Chen's attention was fixed on Queen Vexera. She had been close enough to the blast to take some debris herself, her perfect features marred by a thin cut across one cheek. But she wasn't looking at her injury or shouting orders to her crew. She was staring at Chen's arm, at the blood that flowed freely from his wound. Human blood. Red, iron-rich, carrying oxygen through carbon-based biology that was common throughout the galaxy. Nothing special about it, nothing that should have caused the absolute stillness that had overcome the Zephyrian Queen. But, as the crimson drops hit the deck of her ship, something impossible happened. The bioorganic material of the floor began to smoke where his blood touched it. Not burning, not melting, but reacting in a way that sent visible ripples through the ship's living systems. The Queen's 4 eyes went wide, her 6 arms frozen in positions of shock and disbelief. Around the throne room, her soldiers had stopped their damage control efforts to stare at the spreading reaction. Whatever was happening, it was not something they had ever encountered before. This cannot be real, the Queen whispered, her voice carrying a note of something Chen had not heard before: fear. The blood continued to flow, and, with each drop, the reaction spread further. The walls themselves seemed to recoil from the crimson fluid, their bioluminescent patterns flickering and dimming. Equipment throughout the ship began registering errors as their organic components encountered something that should not exist. Chen looked down at his wound, then, up at the alien queen who ruled 17 star systems and had never known defeat. For the first time since the invasion began, he smiled. You wanted to study human nature, he said as his blood continued its impossible work. Congratulations. Class is in session. The medical bay of the Zephyrian dreadnought was a cathedral of biotechnology, its walls lined with organisms that could diagnose, treat, and heal with precision that human medicine could barely dream of. Queen Vexera stood before a containment unit that held several drops of Marcus Chen's blood, her 4 golden eyes studying the crimson fluid as if it held the secrets of the universe. Which, she was beginning to suspect, it might. Report, she commanded, her 6 arms working at different control surfaces as she analyzed the readings herself. Bioengineer Kethvar, one of her most trusted scientists, approached with evident nervousness. His species, the Vorthak, had been absorbed into the Empire 3 centuries ago, and their expertise in biological warfare had proven invaluable. But now he looked like he was questioning everything he thought he knew about life itself. Your Majesty, the initial analysis defies explanation. The human's blood contains properties that we have never encountered in any known species. He gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. The iron content is normal for a carbon-based life form. The oxygen carrying capacity is within expected parameters. The cellular structure is primitive but functional. But there is something else, something that our instruments cannot properly quantify.
Show me, the Queen demanded.
Kethvar activated a demonstration chamber where bioorganic materials identical to the ship's construction grew in carefully controlled conditions. A single drop of Chen's blood was introduced to the sample, and, immediately the reaction began. The organic matter didn't just smoke or recoil, it fundamentally changed, its molecular structure shifting at a rate that should have been impossible. The blood acts as a catalyst, Kethvar explained, his voice tight with scientific fascination and growing dread.
But, not for any known biological process.
It appears to be triggering a form of evolution, for lack of a better term. The organic matter is being forced to adapt to the presence of the human genetic material, but the adaptation is failing catastrophically.
Failing how?
The bioorganic systems are trying to incorporate human characteristics. Enhanced healing factors, improved cellular regeneration, increased resistance to damage. But our technology cannot handle the integration. The systems are burning themselves out attempting to process something they were never designed to encounter.
Queen Vexera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the medical base temperature. The Zephyrian Empire was built on biotechnology, their ships, their weapons, their entire civilization was grown rather than built. If human blood could cause their technology to fail simply by contact.
What about the human himself, she asked.
Is he aware of what he carries?
Doubtful, Your Majesty. Our scans indicate that his species has no knowledge of these properties. They appear to be dormant under normal circumstances, only activating when exposed to certain bioorganic compounds. Specifically, compounds like those we use in our technology.
The implications crashed over the Queen like a wave.
Humanity wasn't just another primitive species to be conquered, they were a biological weapon that could destroy everything the Empire had built. Every ship, every colony, every technological achievement could be undone by something as simple as a human bleeding on it.
Where did they come from? She whispered, more to herself than to Kethvar.
Your Majesty?
The humans.
Where did their species originate?
What evolutionary pressure could have created such a thing?
Kethvar consulted his data tablets. According to their own records, they evolved on a planet called Earth. The evolutionary history shows the typical pattern of natural selection, with one notable exception: their species has survived multiple extinction-level events that should have eliminated them entirely. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed off 90% of other species.
Yet somehow, humans not only survived but thrived. Show me their medical records, the Queen ordered.
The holographic displays shifted to show human biological data that the Zephyrian computers had extracted from the mining station's databases. What she saw there made her 6 arms tremble with something between awe and terror.
Human healing rates were extraordinary by galactic standards.
Their immune systems were capable of adapting to diseases that would devastate other species. Their ability to survive trauma that would kill most sentient beings was well documented in their own medical literature.
They called it resilience, determination, the will to live.
They had no idea they were looking at evolution's answer to extinction.
Your Majesty, Kethvar said carefully, there is something else. The human's blood doesn't just affect our bioorganic technology. We ran tests on samples from 17 different Empire species.
In every case, exposure to human genetic material triggered similar adaptive responses.
Some species' biology began trying to incorporate human characteristics. Others experienced complete cellular breakdown.
None remained unchanged.
Are you telling me that humans are toxic to every species in the Empire?
Not toxic, Your Majesty.
Evolutionary.
Contact with human genetic material appears to trigger forced evolution in other species. But evolution that happens too quickly is indistinguishable from death. Queen Vexera turned away from the displays, her mind racing through the implications. The Empire controlled over 1,000 worlds, with dozens of species living in carefully maintained biological balance.
If humans could disrupt that balance simply by existing. Bring the human to me, she commanded.
I need to speak with him directly.
Your Majesty, is that wise?
If he is injured again, if more of his blood is spilled.
Then, we will take precautions. But, I must understand what we are dealing with.
Minutes later, Marcus Chen was escorted into the medical bay by a full squad of soldiers wearing environmental suits. The Queen noted that even through their protection, the guards seemed nervous, their bioorganic weapons and armor kept at maximum distance from the human. Chen himself looked remarkably composed for someone who had just discovered his blood could destroy starships. His wound had been treated with synthetic materials, the medical staff refused to use any bioorganic healing aids on him, and he carried himself with the same quiet dignity she had observed earlier.
"Captain Chen," she said, studying his reactions carefully.
"I trust you are comfortable?" "About as comfortable as a prisoner of war can be," he replied. "Though I have to say, your medical technology is impressive. This bandage is better than anything we had on the station." "You speak as if you expect to survive this encounter."
"I don't expect anything. But I hope to understand what's happening here."
"Your people seem afraid of me now, and not because of any weapons I'm carrying." The Queen appreciated his directness.
"Most species would be cowering or pleading for mercy by now. Tell me about your world, Captain. About your species' history." Chen's eyebrows rose at the unexpected question. "Why? Humor me. Your life may depend on it."
For a moment, the human was silent, clearly weighing his options. Then, he began to speak, his voice taking on the cadence of someone telling a story to children.
"Earth is a death world, Your Majesty.
We didn't realize that until we started traveling to other planets and discovered how gentle most worlds are. Our sun bombards us with radiation.
Our weather systems can destroy entire continents. Our planet's surface is mostly covered by water that can crush submarines at depth or freeze explorers at the surface.
We have storms that can level cities, earthquakes that can split mountains, and volcanoes that can change the global climate."
"And yet your species thrived there?" "We didn't thrive. We survived. There's a difference." Chen's expression grew distant. "Humans spent most of our evolutionary history on the edge of extinction. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years.
Plagues that killed vast portions of our population. Asteroid impacts that blocked out our sun. We learned to adapt or die, and, somehow, we kept choosing to adapt."
"You make it sound like a conscious choice." "Maybe it was. Maybe that's what makes us different."
When faced with impossible odds, when any rational being would give up, humans get stubborn.
We refuse to accept that we can't survive something. We change, we adapt, we find a way through.
Queen Vexera felt pieces of a vast puzzle beginning to fall into place.
"Captain, I'm going to share something with you that may be difficult to understand.
Your blood, your genetic material, has properties that we have never encountered before. When it comes into contact with bioorganic technology, it causes fundamental changes that destroy the systems." Chen was quiet for a long moment, processing this information.
"You're saying I'm poisonous to your technology?" "Not poisonous.
Your genetic material appears to carry instructions for adaptation, for survival against impossible odds. When our bioorganic systems encounter those instructions, they try to incorporate them. But the changes happen too quickly, burning out the systems in the process."
"Evolution. Accelerated evolution."
Your species isn't just adapted to survive extinction events, you carry the genetic memory of how to survive them. And, when that memory touches other biological systems, it tries to teach them how to survive too. Shen's voice carried a note of wonder.
"Even if it kills them in the process?" "Precisely. Captain, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer truthfully. Does your species have any others like you? Are there more humans who carry these properties?"
Chen looked her directly in the eyes, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold, not fear, not defiance, but certainty.
"Your Majesty, there are 8 billion humans on Earth alone. We've established colonies on 6 other worlds.
And every single one of us carries the same genetic heritage."
He paused, letting that sink in.
"We're all survivors, because the ones who weren't died a long time ago."
The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of machinery.
Queen Vexera stared at the human, her mind reeling with the implications. 8 billion biological weapons, spread across multiple worlds, each one capable of destroying everything the Empire had built with nothing more than a few drops of blood.
Your Majesty, Kethvar whispered urgently, if what he says is true, if all humans carry these properties,
then, we have just made first contact with the most dangerous species in the galaxy, the Queen finished.
A species that doesn't even know how dangerous it is.
She looked at Chen, who was watching her with curious eyes, clearly trying to understand the significance of their exchange. A species that had survived multiple extinction events. A species whose very biology was a weapon against every other form of life. A species that, even now, was expanding into the galaxy with no understanding of what they represented.
Captain Chen, she said slowly, I believe your species and mine need to have a very long conversation. I'm listening. Not here. Not with you as a prisoner.
This requires different arrangements. She turned to her soldiers.
Release his restraints.
Provide him with quarters appropriate for a diplomatic guest.
And notify the fleet, we are changing course for Imperial space.
I need to speak with the High Council immediately.
Your Majesty?
Kethvar looked confused.
What are your orders regarding the human colonies? Queen Vexera was quiet for a long moment, staring at Marcus Chen as he rubbed circulation back into his wrists. 8 billion humans. 6 colony worlds.
A species that could destroy her empire without even meaning to, but also a species that might hold the key to surviving whatever had required them to become so adaptable in the first place.
No hostile action against any human settlement, she ordered finally.
Until we understand what we're dealing with, we treat humanity as we would any unknown but potentially dangerous phenomenon.
With extreme caution and maximum respect.
As her soldiers escorted Chen to his new quarters, the Queen remained in the medical bay, staring at the samples of his blood. Somewhere out there, 8 billion humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their very existence represented an evolutionary miracle that could reshape the galaxy.
The question was, would that reshaping save the galaxy, or destroy it?
The Imperial Council chamber was a marvel of bioorganic architecture, its living walls pulsing with the collective heartbeat of the Zephyrian Empire. Representatives from 47 species sat in concentric circles around the central speaking platform, their varied forms testament to the diversity that the Empire had united under its rule. At the chamber's heart stood the Nexus, a towering bioorganic computer that processed information from across 1,000 worlds and could predict the outcome of decisions with startling accuracy. Queen Vexera materialized in the center of the chamber via quantum translocation, her 6 arms spread wide in the traditional gesture of supplication before the council. This was the first time in her 3-century reign that she had requested an emergency session, and the assembled representatives buzzed with curiosity and concern.
High Counselor Zephkol, eldest of the Zephyrian nobility, raised one of his 4 hands for silence.
His ancient form was more crystalline than flesh now, a result of the longevity treatments that kept the Empire's leadership stable across the centuries. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eons. Queen Vexera, you have requested this emergency session with claims that a new species poses an existential threat to the Empire.
Present your evidence.
Vexera activated the chamber's holographic systems, and immediately the space filled with images from the mining station encounter. The assembled representatives watched in silence as human blood caused Zephyrian bioorganic technology to smoke and convulse. They observed the cellular breakdown in real time, saw the impossible adaptive responses that burned out systems designed to function for millennia. Honored Council, Vexera began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the vast chamber, I present to you evidence of a species unlike any we have encountered. The humans of Earth possess genetic material that acts as a catalyst for forced evolution in any biological system it contacts. Their very blood is a weapon against everything our civilization has built.
Counselor Threkmar of the Hegemony Worlds, a species known for their aggressive expansionism, leaned forward in his seat.
You speak as if a few primitive beings with unusual biology pose a threat to the Empire's might.
Surely our military forces can contain such a species?
With respect, Counselor, you misunderstand the scale of the problem. Vexera gestured, and new displays showed the human colony worlds, their population centers, their expanding sphere of influence.
There are 8 billion of these beings, spread across multiple star systems.
Each one carries the same genetic properties. Each one is capable of causing catastrophic failure in our bioorganic technology simply by bleeding on it. Counselor Veshera of the Aquatic Confederacy spoke next, her translated voice carrying undertones of deep concern. You are suggesting that this species could destroy our fleets, our colonies, our entire technological base through simple physical contact?
Not through malice, Vexera clarified. Through existence. Our bioengineers have analyzed their genetic structure.
These beings evolved on a death world where extinction events were common. Their biology carries the instructions for survival against impossible odds. When our systems encounter those instructions, they attempt to adapt, but the changes happen too quickly for the technology to handle. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives conferred with their advisors and each other. The implications were staggering: an empire built on biotechnology facing a species whose very presence could cause that technology to destroy itself.
High Counselor Zefkol restored order with a gesture. What do you recommend, Queen Vexera?
Surely you have not called this session merely to inform us of a problem without proposing solutions.
I have considered several options, honored Counselor. The first and most obvious would be complete annihilation of the human species before they can spread further into the galaxy.
A chill settled over the chamber. Genocide was not unknown in Imperial history, but it was generally reserved for species that posed active military threats. The humans, from all accounts, were barely capable of interstellar travel. However, Vexera continued, I believe this would be both morally wrong and strategically foolish.
The humans survived multiple extinction events through adaptation. Their genetic memory contains solutions to survival challenges that no other species has faced.
If we could understand their biology, study their adaptive mechanisms, we might be able to improve our own species. Counselor Drakthal of the Synthetic Collective, whose species had long ago merged with mechanical technology to escape biological limitations, projected his concerns directly into the chamber's communication network.
You propose to study beings whose very existence threatens our civilization? The risk of contamination would be enormous.
The risk of not studying them may be greater, Vexera replied.
Consider this: what evolutionary pressure created beings with such extreme survival adaptations? What threat did they face on their world that required them to become essentially unkillable?
If that same threat exists elsewhere in the galaxy, we may need their expertise to survive it ourselves. The Nexus, which had been processing data throughout the discussion, suddenly pulsed with urgent light. Its synthesized voice filled the chamber with harmonic tones that translated as extreme concern.
Warning. Analysis of human genetic data indicates correlation with ancient galactic threat profiles.
Cross-referencing with archaeological data from extinct civilizations.
Match probability, 97.4%.
The chamber fell silent. The Nexus rarely spoke without prompting, and, when it did, its warnings were taken with utmost seriousness.
Elaborate, High Counselor Zefkol commanded. Human genetic adaptations show specific resistance patterns. Radiation immunity beyond normal parameters. Cellular regeneration rates indicating preparation for environmental toxicity. Neural flexibility suggesting adaptation to reality warping phenomena.
These adaptations match defensive patterns found in ruins of the predecessor civilizations. Vexera felt her heart skip a beat. The predecessors were legendary ancient civilizations that had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins and warnings about something called the Void Plague. Most species considered them mythology, but the Nexus had access to data that suggested otherwise. Are you saying the humans evolved to resist the same threat that destroyed the predecessors? She asked.
Probability assessment indicates human evolution guided by survival pressure from entity or phenomenon matching Void Plague characteristics. Conclusion: humans may be naturally immune to galaxy's greatest historical threat. The implications crashed over the chamber like a tidal wave. If the Void Plague was real, if it was still out there somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, then humanity might be the only species capable of surviving its return.
Counselor Threkmar was the first to break the stunned silence.
This is speculation based on ancient myths and genetic coincidence.
We cannot base empire policy on the fevered dreams of dead civilizations.
Can we afford not to? Counselor Veshera countered. If there is even a possibility that the humans possess immunity to an existential threat, then studying them becomes our highest priority. But how do we study beings whose blood destroys our technology? Drakthol demanded. How do we work with a species that is inherently toxic to everything we are? Queen Vexera stepped forward, her decision already made. We adapt. Just as they did. We learn to work around their limitations, and we teach them to work around ours. But, most importantly, we approach them as equals, not as subjects to be conquered. Equals? Threkmar's voice carried overtones of outrage. They are a primitive species barely capable of interstellar flight. Their weapons are crude, their society fragmented, their understanding of the galaxy minimal. Their weapons may be crude, but they don't need weapons, Vexera replied. Every human is a walking biological weapon against our civilization. Their society may be fragmented, but they have survived multiple extinction events while remaining unified as a species. Their understanding of the galaxy may be minimal, but they possess genetic knowledge that could save all of us. She gestured, and the holographic display showed Marcus Chen in his quarters aboard her ship, calmly reading from a data tablet containing basic information about galactic civilization. Despite being a prisoner who had just learned his species was biologically hazardous to every other form of life, he showed no signs of panic or despair. I have spoken extensively with one of their representatives, Vexera continued. Captain Marcus Chen, a minor security officer from a remote mining station. His calm in the face of impossible circumstances, his willingness to sacrifice himself for his people, his refusal to surrender even when facing overwhelming odds, these are not the characteristics of a primitive species. These are the characteristics of survivors. What do you propose? High Counselor Zefkol asked. I propose that we approach the humans as potential allies rather than subjects for conquest. I propose that we share our knowledge of galactic civilization in exchange for their knowledge of survival. I propose that we prepare for the possibility that whatever created their extreme adaptations may return, and, when it does, we will need their help to face it. The debate that followed lasted hours. Representatives argued about the risks of contact, the impossibility of meaningful cooperation between incompatible biologies, the potential for human expansion to destroy imperial infrastructure. But, underneath all the arguments was a growing awareness that they faced something unprecedented, a species that could destroy them accidentally but might be the only thing capable of saving them intentionally. Finally, High Counselor Zefkol called for order. The Council will vote. All in favor of Queen Vexera's proposal to pursue diplomatic contact with the human species? The vote was close, 24 in favor, 21 against, with 2 abstentions. But it was enough. Queen Vexera, you are hereby authorized to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. You will approach them as equals, share appropriate knowledge of galactic civilization, and attempt to understand their unique biological capabilities. However, all contact will take place under strict quarantine protocols. We cannot risk contamination of the Empire's bioorganic systems until we better understand the scope of the threat. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, Vexera remained in the chamber, studying the data that the Nexus continued to compile. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 8 billion humans were living their lives, unaware that they might be the galaxy's last hope against an ancient enemy. The question now was whether she could convince them to help save a galaxy that had just debated exterminating them. But, if there was one thing she had learned about humans, it was that they specialized in doing the impossible. She just hoped they would be willing to do it one more time. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge was a technological marvel designed specifically for this unprecedented mission. Unlike the bioorganic ships that formed the backbone of the Zephyrian fleet, this vessel was built using synthetic materials that could not be affected by human genetic material. Every surface was metal, crystal, or polymer. Every system was mechanical rather than biological. It was, in essence, a sterile bubble designed to allow safe contact between 2 incompatible forms of life. Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck, watching Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. After 3 weeks of travel and intensive briefings about galactic civilization, he still felt overwhelmed by the scope of what he had learned. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, technologies that seemed like magic to human understanding. And now he was returning home as humanity's first galactic ambassador,
carrying knowledge that would change everything.
Queen Vexera entered the observation deck, moving carefully in the environmental suit that protected her from potential contamination.
The synthetic materials felt alien against her skin, lacking the warm responsiveness of bioorganic technology, but the sacrifice was necessary. She had been in constant contact with the Imperial Council throughout the journey, updating them on her conversations with Chen and preparing them for what promised to be a delicate first contact situation. Nervous, she asked, joining him at the viewscreen.
Terrified, Chen admitted without hesitation. I'm a security officer from a mining station.
I never expected to be responsible for humanity's future in the galaxy.
You may not have expected it, but you have handled it remarkably well.
Your species chose their representative wisely.
My species didn't choose me. Circumstances did.
He turned to face her, his expression serious.
Your Majesty, I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. What are the chances that this goes wrong? That humanity's integration into galactic civilization ends in disaster? Vexera was quiet for a moment, considering her response.
Hi. Your biology is incompatible with the foundation of our technology. Your rapid expansion could destabilize trade routes and political alliances that have existed for millennia.
Your species' tendency toward conflict could provoke wars. And if the theoretical threat we discussed is real, contact with humanity might draw that threat's attention to the galaxy.
But you're willing to take that risk anyway.
I am willing to take that risk because the alternative ignorance of what humanity represents may be worse.
And because in my conversations with you, I have come to believe that your species possesses something that the rest of the galaxy has lost.
What's that?
Hope. The belief that impossible situations can be overcome through determination and adaptation. Most galactic species have achieved stability through careful management of their environment. You achieved survival through the refusal to accept death. That difference may be crucial for what's coming. The Harmony's Edge entered Earth's solar system under full diplomatic protocols, broadcasting in every known language that this was a peaceful first contact mission. The response from humanity was immediate and chaotic: military vessels scrambling to intercept what they perceived as an invasion, scientists desperately trying to establish communication, governments arguing about who had the authority to speak for the species.
Chen watched the defensive fleet gathering around Earth's orbital installations and smiled ruefully. We're not making a very good first impression.
On the contrary, Vexera replied. Your response is exactly what I would expect from a survivor species. Immediate threat assessment, rapid mobilization of defensive forces, multiple competing authority structures trying to assert control.
It's actually quite impressive, from a strategic perspective.
The communication channels crackled to life with dozens of different voices speaking dozens of different languages, all demanding to know who they were and what they wanted. Chen stepped forward to the communication station, speaking clearly into the transmission array.
This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation, aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge.
I am returning home with representatives of the Zephyrian Empire to establish formal relations between humanity and galactic civilization. I am requesting permission to address the United Nations Security Council, the Terran Federation Congress, and any other governmental bodies that wish to participate in these discussions. The response was immediate chaos.
Every news organization in human space began broadcasting speculation about alien contact.
Every government demanded exclusive access to the negotiations. Every military force wanted to know about alien technology and potential threats.
In the span of 6 hours, humanity went from ignorance of galactic civilization to panic about their place in it.
The landing on Earth was carefully orchestrated, taking place at a specially prepared facility in the Sahara Desert where environmental contamination would be minimized. Human scientists and engineers had worked frantically to construct a meeting chamber using only synthetic materials, following specifications transmitted from the diplomatic vessel. Chen had expected the humans to be awed by their first sight of aliens. Instead, he found them intensely curious and remarkably adaptable. Within hours of the landing, xenobiologists were studying Queen Vexera's anatomy through the safety of her environmental suit, linguists were analyzing Zephyrian language patterns, and engineers were taking detailed scans of the alien technology. The formal negotiations took place in the sterile meeting chamber, with representatives from every major human government and organization present. Queen Vexera, still enclosed in her protective suit, stood before an assembly that represented 8 billion humans spread across multiple worlds. People of Earth, she began, her words translated in real time for the global audience watching the historic event. I am Queen Vexera of the Zephyrian Empire. I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a representative of galactic civilization seeking to establish peaceful relations with your species. Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations leaned forward in his chair. Your Majesty, we appreciate your peaceful intentions, but we need to understand what this means for humanity. What are you offering, and what do you expect in return? We offer knowledge star maps showing the inhabited systems of the galaxy, scientific principles that could advance your technology by centuries, cultural exchange with dozens of species. We offer protection from hostile forces and inclusion in the galactic economy. We offer you the chance to take your place among the stars as equals rather than subjects. And, in return, asked President Chen of the Terran Federation. We ask for your understanding and cooperation in dealing with a potential threat. Your species evolved in response to extreme survival pressures, developing genetic adaptations that may prove crucial in facing an ancient enemy. We need to study those adaptations, not to exploit them, but to prepare for what may be coming. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of Earth's leading geneticists, spoke up from the scientific delegation. Your Majesty, Captain Chen has briefed us on the effects of human genetic material on your bioorganic technology. How do you propose we coexist when our very presence is toxic to your civilization? Through adaptation, Vexera replied. Just as your species adapted to survive extinction events, we must adapt to coexist with you. We are already developing synthetic alternatives to our bioorganic systems. It will be a slow process, but not impossible. But why? The question came from General Morrison, representing the military delegation. Why go to such enormous effort for a species you barely know? What aren't you telling us? Vexera was quiet for a moment, then gestured to activate a holographic display. The chamber filled with images from ancient ruins scattered across the galaxy, vast cities reduced to crystallized sand, space stations twisted into impossible geometries, entire star systems where planets hung dead and lifeless in space. These are the remains of the predecessor civilizations, she said solemnly. They ruled the galaxy millions of years ago, achieving technological heights that we can barely comprehend. They left behind only ruins and warnings about something they called the Void Plague, a force that could consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but emptiness. You think this plague still exists? Secretary General Martinez asked. We think it never left. Our analysis of your genetic adaptations suggests that your world was touched by something matching the Void Plague's characteristics. Your species survived through evolutionary changes that gave you resistance to reality warping effects, immunity to exotic radiation, and regenerative capabilities that border on resurrection. You are not just survivors, you are the galaxy's immune system given form. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just another species to be integrated into galactic civilization. They were potentially the only thing standing between that civilization and extinction. Dr. Kim was the first to speak. You're asking us to prepare for war against something that might not even exist anymore. I am asking you to prepare for the possibility, Vexera corrected. But I am also offering you something else. Even if the Void Plague never returns, even if the threat is purely theoretical, your species has something to offer the galaxy. Your genetic memory of survival, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to adapt to impossible circumstances, these traits could benefit every species in galactic civilization. How? President Chen asked. By teaching us to hope again. Most galactic species have achieved stability through careful control of their environment. You achieved survival through the willingness to change when change was necessary. As the galaxy grows more complex, as new challenges arise, we may need to remember how to adapt rather than simply maintaining the status quo. Chen Marcus, not the president, stepped forward. Your Majesty, I've had weeks to think about this, and I keep coming back to one question. If we're so dangerous to your civilization, if our very presence can destroy your technology, why take the risk? Why not just quarantine us and leave us alone?
Because isolation is not survival, Vexera replied. Your species learned that lesson during your own evolutionary history. When faced with extinction events, you didn't hide in caves and wait for the danger to pass. You emerged, adapted, and spread across your world. Now you must do the same across the galaxy. The negotiations continued for days, with experts from both sides working out the complexities of coexistence between incompatible biologies. Quarantine protocols were established, research partnerships were proposed, and cultural exchange programs were designed. But underneath all the technical discussions was a growing awareness that something fundamental was changing. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe would never be the same. On the final day of negotiations, as the agreements were being finalized, Chen found himself alone with Queen Vexera in the observation chamber of the diplomatic facility. Earth stretched out below them, blue and green and alive with the potential of 8 billion survivors. Do you really think we can make this work? He asked. Two civilizations that can't even safely touch each other? I think we have no choice but to make it work, she replied. Your species and mine represent two different approaches to survival, adaptation, and stability. Separately, we have both achieved remarkable things. Together, we might achieve the impossible. And if the void plague is real? If it comes back? Then, we will face it together. Your people with their refusal to surrender, my people with our accumulated wisdom, and all the species of the galaxy united in the determination to survive. Chen looked out at Earth, at the planet that had shaped humanity through trial after trial, creating a species that could bleed on alien technology and accidentally destroy starships. A species that had never learned to quit, even when quitting would have been the rational choice. Well, he said with a slight smile, we've always been good at doing the impossible. I guess it's time to do it on a galactic scale. Below them, Earth turned in space, carrying 8 billion humans into a larger universe than they had ever imagined. And, somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient threats stirred, drawn by the presence of the one species that had been shaped specifically to resist them. The age of humanity in the galaxy had begun 0.3 years after first contact. The Kepler research station orbited the dead world of predecessor Site 7, one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in galactic history. The station was a marvel of hybrid engineering, Zephyrian synthetic technology merged with human innovation, creating structures that neither species could have built alone. It was here that the galaxy's greatest minds worked together to unlock the secrets of the ancient civilization that had once ruled among the stars. Dr. Sarah Kim floated in the zero-gravity laboratory, studying crystalline fragments that had once been part of a predecessor city. The crystals hummed with residual energy even after millions of years, their structure defying conventional physics. Around her, alien colleagues worked with similar samples, their environmental suits protecting them from the minute traces of human genetic material that still posed a threat to bioorganic technology. Dr. Kim called out researcher Vethran of the Collective Archives, his translated voice carrying urgent excitement. We're getting unusual readings from the deep core samples. The crystals are responding to something. Kim pushed off from her workstation and drifted over to the central analysis chamber, where holographic displays showed energy patterns that made her breath catch. The predecessor artifacts, dormant for eons, were beginning to resonate with frequencies that matched theoretical models of extra-dimensional intrusion. When did this start? She asked. Approximately 37 minutes ago. The resonance is increasing in intensity and appears to be spreading to other artifact sites across the galaxy. Dr. Kim, if the theoretical models are correct. The void plague, Kim whispered. It's coming back. Alarms began sounding throughout the research station as automated systems detected the energy signatures that had been programmed as warning signs. Emergency protocols activated, sealing the station and preparing to transmit all collected data to the nearest Imperial naval base. After 3 years of peaceful research, the galaxy's worst fears were about to be realized. In the command center of the Zephyrian dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, Queen Vexera stood before a tactical display that showed the entire galaxy. Red indicators were appearing at archaeological sites across Imperial space, each one representing predecessor artifacts responding to the approaching threat. The pattern was unmistakable, something was coming through from the spaces between realities, and the ancient warning systems were awakening to herald its arrival.
Report, she commanded, her 6 arms working at different control stations as she processed incoming data. Admiral Koth then, her chief military advisor, materialized via hologram from the fleet staging area. Your Majesty, we have confirmation from 47 archaeological sites. Predecessor artifacts are activating in sequence, creating a wave pattern that originates from the galactic edge. Whatever is coming, it's approaching from dark space beyond our sensor range. How long do we have? Based on the activation pattern, the main phenomenon should reach inhabited space within 72 hours. Your Majesty, our fleets are moving to defensive positions, but we have no weapons or shields designed to combat this type of threat. Vexera's heart sank. Despite 3 years of preparation, despite the development of synthetic technologies and hybrid human-Zephyrian innovations, they were still essentially helpless against an enemy that could rewrite the laws of reality itself. What about the humans? She asked. Captain Chen's fleet is moving to rendezvous with our forces. Their ships are crude by our standards, but they're showing no fear of the approaching threat. If anything, they seem eager for the confrontation. Of course they did. In the 3 years since first contact, Vexera had learned that humans responded to impossible odds not with despair, but with determination. They had integrated into galactic civilization with remarkable speed, establishing colonies and trade relationships while maintaining their core identity as survivors. Their genetic material was still toxic to bioorganic technology, but the galaxy was adapting, just as humanity had always adapted. Now it was time to see if those adaptations would be enough. The first signs of the void's return came at the outer rim of the galaxy, where automated sensor stations simply stopped. Not destroyed, not disabled, but erased from reality as if they had never existed. The emptiness spread inward like a slow-moving wave, consuming everything in its path and leaving behind a perfect vacuum where star systems had once thrived. Marcus Chen, now Admiral of the Human Defense Fleet, stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable and watched the sensor readings with grim fascination. The approaching phenomenon defied every law of physics humanity had learned, but somehow it felt familiar. There was something in his genetic memory, something that recognized this particular flavor of extinction. Sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the tactical station, we're receiving data from Zephyrian long-range sensors. The void zone is expanding at approximately 0.03 light speed. At current rate, it will reach inhabited systems in 18 hours. Any signs of conventional forces? Ships, weapons platforms, anything we can actually fight? Negative, sir. Whatever this is, it's not using technology in any sense we understand. It's more like a natural phenomenon. A storm that erases reality instead of just destroying it. Chen nodded grimly. Humanity's weapons were designed to fight enemies that obeyed the same physical laws they did. Plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, nuclear warheads, all useless against something that could simply decide that the matter they were made from no longer existed. Open a channel to Queen Vexera, he ordered. The main screen flickered to show the interior of the Zephyrian command ship, where the alien queen stood surrounded by tactical displays showing the approaching catastrophe. Despite the environmental barriers between them, Chen had developed a deep respect for Vexera during their years of cooperation. She was a leader who understood the weight of impossible decisions. Admiral Chen, she said, her translated voice carrying notes of strain. I trust you have seen the sensor data. We have. Your Majesty, I need to ask you something. In all the research we've done on the predecessors, did we ever find evidence of how they actually fought this thing? They didn't fight it, Admiral. According to the records we've decoded, they tried to hide from it. Entire civilizations retreated to pocket dimensions, sealed themselves into stasis chambers, or fled to the spaces between galaxies. None of it worked. The void found them all. But they left warnings. They built systems to detect its return. They must have had some plan for dealing with it. Vexera was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes studying something beyond the screen. There was one reference we never fully understood. In the final transmissions from the predecessor homeworld, they mentioned something called the adaptive protocol. A theoretical last resort that required. I believe the translation would be evolutionary sacrifice. Chen felt something cold settle in his stomach. Sacrifice how? The records are fragmented, but it appears to involve exposing biological entities to the void's influence while they are still capable of adaptation. The theory was that if a species could survive the initial contact, they might develop resistance that could be passed to other forms of life. Evolution under pressure, Chen said slowly. Just like what happened to humanity during the extinction events. Yes. Admiral, the theoretical models suggest that your species might be uniquely suited to survive void contact precisely because you evolved under similar pressures. Your genetic adaptations, your cellular regeneration, your refusal to surrender, these traits might allow you to maintain cohesion even when reality itself is being rewritten around you. Chen understood what she was saying, and the implications terrified him more than any conventional enemy could have. You're suggesting that humans deliberately expose themselves to the void. Use ourselves as test subjects to develop resistance that could save the galaxy. I am suggesting that it may be our only option. Admiral, conventional weapons cannot touch this enemy. Our shields and armor are useless against something that erases matter at the quantum level. But, if even one human could survive void contact and retain their memories of the experience, that knowledge might be enough to develop defenses for other species. The bridge of the Indomitable fell silent as Chen's crew absorbed the weight of what was being discussed. They were being asked to voluntarily face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own, with no guarantee of survival and only the hope that their deaths might provide useful data. Chen looked around at his crew, humans all, drawn from the colonies and Earth itself, united by the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried their species through ice ages and asteroid impacts. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They understood what was being asked of them. Your Majesty, he said finally, if we do this, if humans voluntarily expose ourselves to the void, what happens to our alliance? What happens to the relationships we've built with galactic civilization? If this succeeds, Vexera replied, humanity will be remembered as the species that saved the galaxy. If it fails, we will all face extinction together. Admiral, I cannot order you to take this risk. I can only ask. Chen turned to his tactical officer. Torres, how many human ships are currently in the area? 47 vessels, sir. Everything from battleships to scientific survey craft. Total personnel count is approximately 200,000. 200,000 humans. Volunteers all, who had signed up to explore the galaxy and defend their new allies. Now they were being asked to face an enemy that consumed reality itself, with only their evolutionary stubbornness as protection. Open a fleet-wide channel, Chen ordered. When the connection was established, Chen looked into the camera that would carry his words to every human ship in the fleet. He thought about Earth, about the 8 billion people who trusted their representatives in space to make the right decisions. He thought about the species they had allied with, the civilizations that had welcomed humanity into the galactic community despite the dangers they represented. This is Admiral Chen, he began. I'm going to be direct with you because that's what our situation demands. We are facing an enemy that destroyed the most advanced civilizations in galactic history. Conventional weapons are useless against it. Our allies' technology cannot protect them. But we have something that no other species possesses, the genetic memory of survival against impossible odds. He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. We are being asked to do what humans have always done when faced with extinction. We are being asked to adapt or die, knowing that our adaptation might save not just ourselves, but every living being in the galaxy. I won't lie to you about the risks. Most of us probably won't survive this. But if we do, if we can learn how to resist this thing, we might be able to teach that resistance to our allies. Around the fleet, Chen knew that crews were making the same calculations he had made. Fear balanced against duty, personal survival weighed against species survival, the terrible mathematics of sacrifice that had defined human history. I'm not ordering anyone to volunteer for this mission, Chen continued. But, I am asking. We came out here to explore the galaxy, to build relationships with alien species, to ensure humanity's future among the stars. That future depends on whether the galaxy survives the next 24 hours. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ship after ship reported full volunteer crews ready to face the void. Scientists and soldiers, engineers and civilians, all united by the understanding that someone had to stand between the galaxy and extinction. As the human fleet moved toward the approaching void zone, Chen found himself thinking about the mining station where this had all begun. Marcus Chen, the security officer, had never imagined becoming Marcus Chen, the admiral who led humanity into its first galactic war. But, then, that was the thing about humans, they specialized in becoming whatever the situation required.
The void was coming. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had fallen before it.
But, they had never faced a species that had been shaped by extinction itself, a people who carried the memory of survival in their very genes. It was time to see if humanity's greatest strength, their refusal to accept defeat, would be enough to save them all. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and, for the first time in their history, humans would be fighting not just for their own survival, but for the survival of every living thing among the stars.